Welcome to Dawson Speaks, Liberation Through Valuation, where soul meets soil. Today we have none other than Miss Danyetta Fleming of Covenant Security. This is a truly a blessing because Danyetta is not international, but intergalactical. She's on satellites all over the universe. And today she is blessing us with this interview with Covenant Security. I affectionately refer to her as the brain, but her real name is Danyetta Fleming. And if you watched the summit a couple of weeks ago, everybody has since forth been referring to her as the brain, but she's still the brain, but I got to make sure everybody knows her real name. So this is our normal. This is our normal time. We usually talk every Sunday morning while she's at swimming. Her son is very close to qualifying for the next Olympics. So please don't forget about old Uncle Thad when he makes that big splash. I'd love to be there to bear witness. Thank you for coming on to the podcast and radio show. I know we've talked about it for quite some time, and you have been in my hemisphere and a very, very integral part of this 10K journey since the inception. We were introduced roughly 3 years ago through the wizard in the U.S. Forest Service, and you have been riding with me and watching over me, and I have felt very, very blessed. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you for all that you've done, all that you do, and let's just jump into it. Tell the folks about your background, the cybersecurity, why it's so important, more now than ever, and the future of where it's going. And then we're going to tie all that back into real estate and valuation.
Absolutely. So first off, I want to say thank you to you for having me on the program, having me a part of your journey. This has been quite interesting. I love learning, and you have definitely helped me understand the importance of valuation, the importance of the work that you do, and it's just been a blessing to be a part of it. So thank you so much for having me. And just to get a little background about myself, I've been in cybersecurity probably approaching close to like 27, almost 30 years. So I hope I don't look like it, but I've been in this for quite a while. I got started really by accident. I like to say serendipity. When I came out of college, I got an announcement from the Department of Army for this position, and I didn't understand a word that it was saying to me. It just made absolutely no sense. And for whatever reason at that time, I was feeling adventurous, and I said, well, let me go ahead and take this opportunity. And actually, it wasn't just being adventurous, because I'm going to step back and give credit to my grandmother. She said to me, her and my father said to me, why go down a path if you already know how it's going to end? And I live by those words. I know a lot of people might say that's a little risky, but I do live by those words. And so I had no clue what the job was for. I ended up landing in New Jersey. They basically were like, thanks for coming out. And by the way, you're going to do this accredited, at the time they were calling it like accreditation engineer, info security. And I said, sure, why not? Let's just do this. So they gave me a box with some rainbow colored books in it. And those that know what that was. And between that and some really great mentors, I got my start in cybersecurity. And so from there, I had the opportunity to work, supporting different missions for Department of Army. I went on to do that more on a national level and international level with them, and then moved to Booz Allen Hamilton and worked for them for a little bit. And then I got the calling to go and do this on my own. And not too long after that, I started Covenant Security Solutions. So we are 23 years as of 2026, and I've had the opportunity to support cybersecurity literally around the world. I don't know if we're intergalactic, like you said, but we're
Nah,
working
nah,
on
that's
it.
the next step. I know you're going to launch a satellite, something. I know you work. Can you tell us how many countries you're currently working in?
Oh gosh, we're in about 4 or 5 different countries right now. So we're working in South Africa, we're working in Cameroon, um, we're working in India, and in El Salvador. So Latin America. So we're in multiple different countries across the globe, and each one of those are kind of our major hubs, and each one of those are responsible for managing our efforts in each region.
Do
So
you find there to be a language barrier in working in those other countries, or computer is computer and that it takes care of itself?
you know, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. It's interesting to watch because um, I'm gonna set India aside for a second because they're quite heavy in the technology space already. I mean, they're already integrated into Silicon Valley, huge tech sector in India, so they're a little bit different. But I want to say for the other regions, it's interesting because it's kind of like watching what the US might have looked like in cybersecurity about 10, 15 years ago. But they're catching up extremely fast. So I don't think it'll be 15 years for them to get to where we are, maybe 4 or 5. With the advent of artificial intelligence and more interconnection in terms of networks. But their view of cybersecurity is still trying to say, okay, I understand it, but do I really have to spend money on this? Is this something that's going to affect my life? And getting that knowledge base and understanding that is where that is still growing. And I think that's still growing even here to some extent in the US. I mean, if you're a large entity or entity that's already working in technology in some respect, then you are by default required to understand something as it relates to cybersecurity. When it comes to individuals, I think a lot of people are just now finding out while it can help, it can also, a lot of things can go wrong just as fast. And so, when you talk about the future, getting back to your initial question to me, what the future is, I think the future is really people having to understand cybersecurity from a day-to-day perspective. It's always been, especially here in the States, if somebody got hacked or a data breach, you heard it on the news and they talked about how many records were stolen. And the immediate response was, oh, let me go reset my password. Well, we're beyond that now. We're beyond resetting of passwords. So,
And I like to
mhm,
jump in there and get to. I mean, I know we could talk about cybersecurity until
mhm,
infinity, but what I think is really important that we talked a lot about at the summit is the with like you just said, you can lose everything in the blink of a moment. But I think with the decentralization and moving
yes,
towards the blockchain and cryptocurrency and smart contracts, and that being relevant for the future and how we move forward, and not just being able to change your password to fix a data breach. You could lose your whole entire life savings and generational wealth
yes.
just by somebody hacking or getting access to your digital wallet, which is what will be attached to everyone here in the
Mhm.
future. And my concern is like older folks and how do they protect themselves and with the smart contracts and the digital wallets when a lot of them have not participated in the regulatory system. How do we work on that?
So I think it's multiple different things. And I wouldn't say just older folks, right? I would just say there's another level of digital literacy that's going to be required as we move into this age of AI. And as you mentioned, in terms of, being able to manage smart contracts, things moving into this Web3 environment. So, I want to kind of point out some basic things that people can do. So, one is really being conscientious about your identity and your identity documents, your identity information. That is one of the biggest things that's hurting people right now, is that the systems are built off of trying to take facial scans. They're basically trying to get data points to make up for something that, quite frankly, we take for granted. Is, the average person, you're used to being able to walk up and I can tell if John is John or Jane is Jane, right? If I've been around them for a few years, I'm taking in thousands of data points in order to be able to determine who they are. Um, you can't do that to that same level and extent online. It'll take a facial scan. It'll take your digital fingerprints. That's the biometric end. It may have asked for a pass key, but being able to understand what it's doing and to be able to protect that information, being cognizant of who's around your identity documents, because oftentimes when it fails online, the first thing they want is a copy of your passport, a copy of your driver's license, whether you got real ID or not. What documentation, your birth certificate, what do you have to say that you are you, right? So I want to start there, because that's becoming that line of being able to identify who you are and being able to have true attribution is getting blurred, and it's becoming more and more difficult. And the only person that can protect that is you, right? That's not something that the government protects on your behalf. They maintain the documentation, yes. However, you are the only person that can make sure that all that information continually aligns. And so that gets into sort of the core piece, because that's how you're getting your interest into this digital world. Whether you're purchasing something online, whether you're maintaining your assets online, that's happening through identity. So that's the first piece. So I'm gonna pause there, see if you have any questions on that before I go to
Well,
the next.
it is because I lost my phone a couple of months ago, as you remember,
Mhm.
and it took me, all of my passwords were in my phone. So when I they started to try to prove I was me, I couldn't, because I didn't have any redundancy, I didn't have any backup or alternative. So I've since written all of my passwords down, I think,
Yes.
and placed them in a secure place, but also having multiple entry into my Apple database. So now I got a Apple Watch and I got another phone in order to be able to gain access. But I didn't realize it had gotten so, before, when I lost my phone, I could just go into the store and get a replacement and I was back up and running. Now they won't let you in and will lock you out for an extended period of time, and you don't have access. Um, and
Yeah,
I
and a
found
lot of
that to be
people
very
don't
frustrating.
realize. Yeah, it's becoming harder and harder because there's more trust. And that's a whole nother podcast we could go into, whether or not that trust is rightfully so, but that trust is being placed on these identity places. They're saying, they're moving beyond passwords now. You're going to find it, probably, I would say, in the next year or less, it's going to be harder and harder to even find places that actually have passwords. A lot of it is going to making sure you've got a separate authenticator, right? And like you said, those authenticators are sitting on your phone. So if you don't have a second phone, if you don't have a way to put it on your desktop, it's going to be very difficult if something bad happens to be able to prove otherwise and to be able to prove your identity. So, that's where I wanted to start, because that is moving in a lot of different directions. And you have people who are spoofing your identity and your likeness and your images now, because of AI. You can speak into uh, some of these platforms that are out here. I'm trying to think of one right off the top of my head, where it will allow you to record your voice and then use your voice to create videos, content, anything on your behalf. But while you can do that, so can someone else. So,
Mm,
while you're
mm.
doing podcasts and different things like that, you got to think about your voice signature. Can somebody take that? Can somebody take your image? Can they take the way you tilt your head, the way that you look at your look, and now be able to create that? So that's something I want people to be cognizant of. It's going to be even more important as we step into these newer forms of assets. So I'm going to circle back to the second piece that we were talking about, and we spent a lot of time on at the summit, was the reality that the banking systems, the infrastructure as we know it is moving very fast into what we call Web3 infrastructure, which is the underpinning of it is blockchain. And so, riding on top of blockchain, you have all of these different types of services that are coming out, which is, people being able to have smart contracts, like you mentioned, decentralized finance, being able to use the cryptocurrencies to be able to purchase homes, to be able to purchase artwork, to be able to transact business online.
Can
All
you
of
put
this
a
is
pause in
moving.
that right there and
Yes,
tell
sir.
you and I were having a conversation the other day about somebody being allowed to use their cryptocurrency as a down payment, and that's here. Can you talk about that real quick?
Yeah, I could talk about it, and what I'll do is I'll send you a link to the article actually after this, so they can get more details, because I'm going to kind of summarize. But basically, they went through one of the main mortgage lenders. And what's happening, people may or may not be aware of, is that they're starting to allow cryptocurrency to be seen as an asset, right? So, before it was, people used to call it play money, it's never going to go anywhere, but now it's considered an asset. And because it's being seen as an asset, you can use your cryptocurrency as a leverage to be able to purchase a home. And I believe it's Fannie Mae. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to go back and double check. But I believe it was Fannie Mae that allowed that to happen. As long as that asset is sitting in a regulated um, uh, exchange, for example, in this particular case, I believe it was Coinbase. So they had this asset inside of Coinbase. They were able to then leverage that asset to allow them to purchase a home.
But what if you're
So,
not on Coinbase? What if you keeping it in your digital wallet and you want to be off the grid? Can you still?
well,
How do? Was that still considered an asset? And then how do they verify it, or does it have to be on a Coinbase or one of those
it has to
accepted
be in a
platforms?
regulated, my understanding, it needs to be in a regulated entity. So it has to be someplace that, say you default, there's a way for them to be able to um, capture that asset.
Okay, okay. So you don't have to put your whole thing
You
in
don't have
there,
to
but
put
it has to have.
everything in there, right? You could,
Okay,
you know, you could keep the 20,000 or whatever you need, or whatever the amount of asset is that's necessary in order to be able to purchase in a regulated entity. Coinbase happened to be the one for this particular example that we were talking about. I'd have to go back and look and see what that list of the regulated entities are for people to, and I'll give that to you, and you can pin that in the comments afterwards, so people can see, how
and
they
that
can
was
use
one
it.
of the things that really took over the summit. We ended up extending the session where we were talking about cyber and crypto, and you and Professor Sistrunk. I mean, that was just a game changer. And then when we started talking about the
Hmm.
questions that Jenny Stevens from the Harris Property Center asked,
Right.
the concern is with us going through the largest transformation of wealth in history, and then in heirs property, people already being blocked out because of fractionalized interest. How does that look when that interest is now recorded on the blockchain? And on the one hand, I know you talked about it being good for heirs property
Hmm.
because now you have a record of all of the potential heirs and accountability moving forward and what everybody's interests are. But on the other
Right.
side, if they are being already recorded illegally, then they may be locked out forever and unable to reverse that transaction moving into perpetuity. So it really gets into how do you protect? Is I guess it's the blessing and the curse, so to
It's
speak.
the blessing and the curse. And I would say let's start with the good side of it. The beautiful side of it is that if you have property and you've got multiple members in your family, and praying everyone can get along, I mean, this is a way for you to be able to track, manage, be able to handle sales, contracts, all of that within a digital framework. So that makes it a lot easier for families to be able to not only hold on to their wealth, but to also expand their wealth and make decisions from a more centralized standpoint. You know, we have got into a little bit about the tokenization aspect. So you can take the property and say they've got 100 acres of land and maybe 60 heirs, right? They can then be able to distribute that amongst all the heirs. And then whenever there's decisions that are made, that can then be more easily divided. So, say if someone decides that they want to sell timber off of their particular portion, they can then divide that the income off of that amongst all of the family members. So that in a good scenario, this works out. But say if you're in a scenario where you've got family members that aren't necessarily getting along, you have a family member that goes and decides to sell the timber and not identify the fact that they're connected to these other family members online, that's something that's going to be very hard to reverse. The nature of it is that it's meant to be sort of a immutable online recording of transactions. Now, it's not to say that it'll be that way forever. I wouldn't go that far, but I think it just makes it that much harder for people to correct when something goes wrong. And that's where, prior to these systems coming online and being, they're going to the courthouse, and then all of a sudden now everything in the courthouse is online as a record of what the last transactions were, right? Before that happens, I think it's important for families. I think it's important for individuals. Get your house in order, right? Take the time to figure out who's on the deed. Don't just assume, okay, Auntie so and so is on the deed. But if Auntie so and so passed away 30 years ago, when that hits an online system, it looks as if no one is tending to that property. That's what it
Yeah.
looks like to the system. It doesn't look like there's heirs. No one knows what's going on. So, that was a big part of our discussion. And I think that's true not just for people with heirs property, that's true for all of us. It's important to understand your digital footprint, but even more so what your physical footprint is before it becomes digital.
So I think that's the part that we really have to pay attention to now, the physical footprint before it becomes digital, because one of the things that you just touched upon was tokenization, and I would like to for you to expand on tokenization for those that aren't quite up to speed on what tokenization is. I know Professor Sistrunk gave an illustration of how he bought a piece of property and collateralized it and tokenized it. I think it's an opportunity for people to participate in bigger types investments with the smart contract and the tokenization, because regardless of how fractionated their interests are, it can be caught or kept up with and chronicled through the smart contract, whatever happened to worry about your participation or distribution.
Absolutely. And I think you did a great job. You just kind of broke it out. I mean, the word, in essence, just kind of describes what it is, which is you being able to take an asset and break that asset down into to many parts. So, for example, if you own an apartment building or you own a home, you can then say, taking our heirs property example, if the mother passes it on to her three children, each of the three children can own a tokenized interest in that property, and they can determine, like, each person owns a third of that property, and therefore they have a physical tangible certificate that allows them, in a token that allows them to show that they have physical ownership in that property. And that can be done not just for property, it can be done for artwork, it can be done for cars, it can be done for anything, because this is a digital representation of being able to break something into many parts, right? An asset into many parts.
Now, so when you start to break it into art and cars, is that where you start to move into the non fungible tokens?
Yes,
So, can you
absolutely.
explain to folks what the non fungible tokens are and exactly how they work?
So, non fungible token, it's so interesting because you
They
got me
refer to them
scratching
as
here.
NFT.
Right, NFTs, and basically what a non-fungible token is basically saying that it has a uniqueness to it. So in other words, if you have non-fungible token for like a piece of art, you're basically saying that you have the original holdings, a certificate that you can be recorded as the owner of that, and that no one, it can't be replicated, it can't be broken into different parts like we were talking about in terms of tokenization. It is a way to kind of certify and validate that its uniqueness from a digital aspect.
So I guess the one that really always stands out in my mind is the album that Wu Tang sold or auctioned off that went for like $7 million, and the folks thought they would be able to reproduce and make a lot of money off of it. However, they're not able to release that music for like 120 years or something like that. Can you talk about that and how you're able to keep track of it? That's
You
my
have more
biggest.
control. Yeah, you get more control. So that's why I said it's a double-edged sword. Like I think it's going to open up a great opportunity for people to be able to manage their assets, understand the value of assets. You always hear these stories about. I saw something the other day where this lady had costume jewelry that she bought at a garage sale or something, and she turned around and found out it was worth, I don't know. It was a carat diamond, so I want to say it was worth like it was $30,000 or something like that because it was really old and it was like a diamond, but she thought it was costume jewelry. Well, that the beauty of being able to put things online is that say your grandchild comes across something like that, 100 years later, they now understand what that means, what that digital asset, because there's a digital record, they understand what that physical asset's value is. I think it's also valuable in terms of when you talk about property, right? It's kind of taking it and putting it into a digital um, way that we're now looking at apples to apples, right? It's not just a matter of someone coming back and saying, well, you're in this neighborhood or, this person owned it prior. Some of the, I would say, emotion and objectivity comes out of things when you're able to actually assign a value to it from the owner and then be able to in perpetuity maintain that value for that asset. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for people from
And
that
I think
perspective.
BlackRock is digitizing now. Um,
Yes.
so many of the big players, and my concern or yeah, my concern is
Hmm.
small and limited resource communities will be left behind, and this will only accelerate the wealth gap and add velocity and momentum to it. And uh, and to that point is leading me back to thinking about when you talked about digital colonization. I think
Hmm.
that's a real thing in that
I
small
think it
communities.
can, yeah, I think it can accelerate or it can de-accelerate, right? It just depends, to the place. One of the things that we were talking about, and I'll jump back to decolonization next, but I wanted to talk to that one point is that there's time now, not a lot, but there's time now to learn, to understand, to not wait until something um, happens and then now you all of a sudden you need access to capital and somebody is saying, hey, the only way you're going to purchase this is you've got to have Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana. You can't wait until that point in order to get engaged. And so I think I enjoyed our conversation then and enjoying this one, getting people to start to think about like it's not something off in the woo woo future. It is a now thing. The laws are being change now. And as you mentioned, BlackRock, multiple others, I think Fidelity, I think Zelle, banks around the globe are making a point to invest in this technology and to bring it online. So it's incumbent upon, I think, the community, especially in under resource communities. It doesn't cost a lot to learn.
And I
Doesn't
think
cost
that
a lot.
that ties into your cybersecurity and working platform, workforce
Yes.
development. All of
Yes.
these are extremely critical, and I'm excited. I feel like I know just enough to be dangerous, but I feel really inadequate in
Mhm.
what I do know. But I am thankful to have resources like you and Professor Sistrunk to be
Mhm.
able to tap into. And for me, it's about being able to pass it on to those that are coming behind because they are more familiar with the technology and less fearful of it. And it's what's going to be needed. I mean, right now we're
Yes.
working on modernization, and one of the things that Professor Sistrunk said, it's like we're in the phase of when Henry Ford invented the Model T. So the car was
Right.
running, but the car didn't really take off until the highways, the roads, the gas
Exactly. The
stations,
infrastructure.
and now we
Yeah.
have to develop the infrastructure, and there's so many opportunities with people to be able to get jobs and the infrastructure moving forward. And we hear all this stuff about AI. Will AI, how do you see AI and the blockchain, and is that the next great job front for people to be able to take advantage of?
Oh, absolutely. That is the next great job front. And that's where we've made the investment to stand up a whole workforce development program around between AI, cyber, and uh, blockchain, and just the Web3 technologies in general. You're going to find that that's the future. We're going to move more things online. You've already got. We didn't get to talk much about robots, but that's coming online, and so people have to be investing in themselves. We're going to have autonomous trucks. So the reality that you're going to always have a job with UPS, that may not be the case. They may
Well,
actually need somebody that's behind the scenes, that's making sure it doesn't run off the road, or who knows. Like they have the people that run the Raymos behind the scenes, right? That those are going to be the jobs of the future, and I think
but
it's
it doesn't
important.
take as many people. And
It doesn't.
what is more important, um, AI, blockchain, or cybersecurity?
I think all three, right? I think it's going to be all three because I mean the blockchain. Everyone's focusing on the crypto aspects, but I think smart contracts are going to be the contracts of the future. We're not going to be sitting here looking at somebody sending you a contract to do international business, and they're sitting with a lawyer to write out a contract. That's not going to be how it's going to work in probably 3 to 5 years.
So one of the
There.
holdups on the smart contracts and
Mhm.
using platforms such as Ethereum has been the gas fees in order to make those exchanges. Do you see the gas fees coming down, and will that make the acceptance of smart
Yeah,
contracts accelerate?
yeah. Volume is going to cause that. It's just going to be volume, and you're going to start seeing that happen more and more with international trade, and then I think it's going to bleed into local trade,
So
and
how
you
does
just
that?
have.
So
Mhm.
can you talk a little bit about the gas fees, but then how do the smart contracts impact commodities, tariffs, gas, oil? I mean, you need a lot of power
Yeah, that's a
to run
lot.
these.
Like now I'm gonna say that part you probably want to go back to the professor on, because I'm not gonna jump down that road. But I
Okay.
can back up and talk a little bit about the piece of what we're gonna need from a workforce perspective. So um one, I think we talked about the need for blockchain. I know that that's going to continue to expand. That technology is going to continue to roll out. We talked about artificial intelligence. That's not going anywhere. I think that maybe we might have rolled out it and expected it to do a little bit more than it was capable of on this go round. But the reality that people are going to, especially from a professional standpoint, you're going to continue to see jobs getting replaced or displaced as a result of it. And I think it's going to be critical for people to understand the technology and understand how they can get in and be a force multiplier um, with it versus necessarily trying to say pump the brakes. I don't think that's going to happen. And then last but not least, cybersecurity. It's going to change. The way that we've done cybersecurity to date is in the process of morphing. I think the technology end of it is going to probably lessen because you're going to have more technology being built through artificial intelligence. But the governance aspects of what you're willing to allow it to do in your organization, how that's going to be handled. And then I think we're going to get into a sci-fi aspect of cybersecurity where we're going to be trying to figure out what did the computer decide to do on its own that maybe it wasn't authorized to do. And who do you hold account?
Wow, that's a lot. Um, and we're getting back to
Which gets
oh,
to the
what's
colonization question you had.
yeah, the colonization. What's the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie with artificial intelligence, John Connor?
Oh gosh, what was the name of that movie? Terminator.
Terminator. Like I feel like
Terminator.
we're in the Terminator now,
Yeah, we're heading
where
into that.
everything is just kind of taking over. But I think, and help me out here. I
Mhm.
think that everybody is missing the demand side of economics. If everything is all the jobs are moving to AI, who is their customer? Because if nobody has jobs and all the jobs been taken over by AI, who's producing revenue to be able to buy these products?
So there's a whole nother piece where the AIs are going to be their customers on behalf of their um, owners. It's going to be sci-fi. There's no other way to say it.
Well,
There's
what am I
already
scared?
wallets that are being given to the AI. So, by default,
So
there
what are
must be
people supposed to do? What's our function supposed to be at this point?
uh, that's a good question. I think there's still going to be functionality. I, like I said, I don't think it's going to move as fast as people are hoping. You're already hearing some dial back from some organizations. It's coming, but I think some people jumped ahead and got rid of folks with the hope that AI was going to step in and take full um,
I know that looks like what the government did, got rid of a bunch of jobs
a
that
bunch of
need critical
jobs.
critical expertise, especially
Yeah, I don't have an answer really, to be honest. I don't know what the expectation is. I think, if you listen to some of the talking heads on this, so to speak, the big tech companies, they believe we'll just all go and have leisure time and be able to have money deposited in our account to do the things that we want to do, right?
but you
I
would have to
guess
be
all of
generating
us are
some
going to go
level
to
of
Disney
revenue.
World. I don't know.
Well, I think in evaluation, I think we've already moved to a lot of automated valuation models,
Mhm.
but the whole appraisal modernization is here. And right now, I think there's roughly 70,000 supposedly appraisers across the country. In the future, you won't need 70,000, but you will need people that can analyze and critically think through the data to make the analysis. And everything is not going to be, especially in the urban and underserved markets, in the rural areas where there's less information, those critical thinking skills and the application of the data science is where the future is. And the profession right
Absolutely.
now is still holding on. And I believe it, they will be left behind. Everybody won't be able to go. However, those folks that are coming up that are studying the data science and embracing the technology, I think that's the future.
That's the future. That's across the board. And I think it's you brought up a really good point. People have to figure out how to embrace something that they don't feel comfortable with. And we're entering an era, if you're going to be a part of this wealth transfer, if you're going to be a part of what's happening, you have to embrace the unknown. You have to be willing to get outside your comfort zone. You know, you can't say, "Oh, that's my kid. They're smart on the computers," but what they may not be smart in is the wisdom that goes behind the technology. They may not understand, the decisions that are being made with assets. So you can't just put it off on somebody else. And I think that's the big thing that, we talked about, and I want to reiterate is that this is coming, it's here, and your ability to thrive and survive is going to be embracing the unknown.
Well, I
And so,
think, and this is part of what we do in our heirs property training. That's why I believe it's so important for this thing to be intergenerational, because, like
mhm,
you said, the young people may have the technology but don't have the wisdom. The older folks have the wisdom but don't have the technology, and it's important to start having those conversations now so everybody can see the importance of how we move as a community moving forward to be
mhm.
more solid. And again, I think the intergenerational. What's a good age to start? I mean, for students to learn, because I know some of our young folks are extremely
I would
strong.
say that I would start at 6 years old. Like I don't
Really,
at 5, 6 years old. I mean, the world that 5, 6 year olds are Gen Alpha, right? The world they're going to inherit is going to require them to understand this at a level that you know they aren't going to be able to move unless they understand how blockchain works, right? They aren't going to be able to make decisions. They aren't going to be able to manage assets. They're, I would start at 6 years old. I mean, they need to
but
understand what's coming. They need to understand, and go through 100. It's
how do
just
they?
different levels.
How my issue is, how do they determine the internet from reality? I see a lot of young folks that can't figure things out because everything has been digitized, so to speak. So now they think they everything, but everything that you look up in Google or online is really not real, and they
It's
have
not.
no social skills in order to be able to problem solve.
So I'm going to jump back to something you said, which is important: community. And I think there's two different paths that have to happen. One, you need to come together physically as your community, whether that's mom, dad, kids, uncle, auntie, neighbors. You have to still come together physically and understand everything can't be done online. And also understand that there's not, I know they like to say this, but AI, these machines, they are fallible. They make mistakes. They misinterpret information. And that has real impacts on people. And I think one of the outpourings of this, and we're starting to see this a little bit with Gen Z, is some of them are just putting down their phones and going, I think Barnes and Noble's on the uptick because they want real books, right? So we have the capacity to disengage and to engage with this world on our terms. And I think that's the piece I want to also leave with people. Like, yeah, it's coming. Yes, you got to understand what it is. Yes, you have to embrace it. But you have to embrace it on your terms. And the only way that happens is if we still connect from a physical standpoint and we understand what's valuable to us as a community, so that then we can have a voice when this happens from a digital perspective. So when I say 6 years old, they may not really understand everything. But they understand that if you give them $5 to go buy a piece of candy, they understand what that means, right? You could go to any 6 year old across the globe and they'll get that concept. So you can start with something basic like, okay, this operates like money, right? This is really basic. If you have a wallet, this is what a wallet is. Normally you take your money out of wallet to go pay the $5. Well, okay, that's the same. So you can start basic like that. But
That's it.
really developing that interconnection in the community is critical.
But I think what do I think? You talked about people getting together personally. I
Mhm.
cannot tell you the number of times I see people engaging and they're sitting there texting each other, or everybody's got their phone and we're physically together, but everybody is disengaged. And I think you have to be intentional about the communication, and everything is our attention spans are shorter now than ever.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I had my son complain to me the other day because I gave him a online video that was 11 minutes.
Yeah.
He was about to cry. He was like, "You're gonna make me watch? It's 11 minutes." I was like, "11 minutes?" I'm like, when did we get to the point that 11 minutes is a
And I
lot of
found it
time?
everything like I'm starting to change my writing because I write too much. And I lose people because
Mhm.
everybody wants a one pager or the cliff notes. They don't want the story, and I get long
They
winded.
don't. But see, we can't lose track of the original technology. And that's us. That's our connection. If you remember back in the very beginning of our conversation, I was saying, we never think about identity. And I can't remember how many points, but I think it was something about 10,000 data points that you take in when you initially meet someone. That's what the human brain is doing, right?
Hmm.
When we sit down, we're trying to mimic human activity with technology. If they try to take in 10,000 data points per person, you would the AI would lose its mind. We would take up every bit of water on this planet after we
Hmm.
get done trying to analyze 50 people, right?
Okay,
So,
and
mhm,
with that, I'm gonna prepare to try to close out with what you just said about AI taking up a lot of water. With AI, it's going to take a lot of energy, a lot of power, a lot of
mhm,
water and cooling, but also it produces a lot of contamination. So while we're feeding this AI, we're simultaneously destroying the planet and environment.
yes,
How do we grow it and do it responsibly? Because those plants or power sources will be in small limited resource communities, and it will impact their valuation like it's currently doing in Memphis and Mississippi, where they have those 27 illegal carbines for artificial intelligence contaminating soil within 1 mile of houses and schools.
right, right. So if you remember, one of the things I talked about was that cybersecurity is going to morph, right? And when we talk about security, we're not going to be just talking about trying to stop a hacker from getting in your network. One of my colleagues actually brought to light one of the key critical areas that covers this, which is cyber sustainability. So when you go out and you talk about being able to bring all this technology online, looking at the sustainability aspects, what's the impact to the community? What's the impact when you're talking about not just the water, the soil, the air, but to the people? Because oftentimes, even prior to these AI data centers, you had the same issues when you're talking about data centers for like Amazon or any of the other companies that are doing data center work. Um, it's popping down in these communities, and what's the impact? And how what's their voice, and how do you manage their voice in terms of being able to manage security? Because you know a damaged environment and unhappy people cannot lead to profitability. It cannot lead to economic growth. It
So
doesn't
will
happen
this
that way. Long term, it ends up being a downturn for that community, right?
and
So
it impacts it for generations and generations, which we've already
exactly.
seen, and
Talk
is
about
part of
reconsideration of value.
exactly. Look at you, reconsideration of value. You go, girl.
We
Yeah,
talk enough.
yeah,
I might have picked something up, a little something.
yeah. But I mean, I it's really So we still have a lot to cover, and we need to have another conversation. I'm excited about the policy summit we'll be having in Cincinnati. Folks wanted to definitely make sure that you and Professor Sistrunk were a part of that. I know we've got you locked down. I got to start having some conversations with him. I had some preliminary conversations with him, but we are starting on working on that, pulling everything together. The first one was really it was really good, and I couldn't have been more pleased. And some of the folks that had visited from Cincinnati wanted to make sure that we bought it to Cincinnati, and
Mhm.
being from Cincinnati, we're really excited to start to put this thing together. Thank you for coming on to the show. I know you probably still got another hour or so for the Olympic swimming champion to finish
Yes,
training. So I know we're cutting to your Sunday work and planning time, and I thank you for taking
that's
out.
fine.
What would you want to leave us with today as your final comment and statement?
My final statement would be to really think about what it means to secure your way of life. That is the tagline, actually, our original tagline for um, Covenant Security Solutions. We always want people to look at it. Yeah, it's digital. Yeah, it sounds complex, but how are you securing your life? And I think that definitely plays into looking at the value of your family, the value of not just your assets, but the people that are around you, and how can you best protect them. And last but not least, I did want to share that we do have a online course for those who are just getting into blockchain, trying to understand what it's about. We do have that on our Cov Cyber website for people to go in and they can take the course on demand.
And what is that website for the people out there?
Okay, so you can go to our main company website, which is www.covenantsec.com. That's COVENANTSEC.com. And if you go to the middle bullet, that is our Cov Cyber website, and then go to corporate training. And then under there, you'll be able to see blockchain. And we also have training up for scams as well. So, being able to spot, understand what the different types of online scams are and how you can better protect yourself.
Well, we'll need to get a link on our new website to your links for people to be able to get to for the training. Again, I'm
Mhm.
excited that we are working on our 99th website. And
You got a lot of ideas.
yeah, and it just kind of keeps morphing, but hopefully we've gotten it down now, and really excited. And again, thank you for all that you have done for us, all that you do, and all that you will continue to do moving forward in the cyber realm, making sure we're all safe. Thanks again, Danyetta, for coming out and doing this podcast with us. And this is this week's episode of Thaddaus Dawson Speaks, Liberation Through Valuation, where soul meets soil. And our guest today was Danyetta Fleming of Covenant Security. We covered a multitude of topics in cybersecurity, digital colonization, blockchain technology, tokenization, and we will be talking and discussing these things at our upcoming policy summit in Cincinnati, October 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. We had a pretty robust conversation with her and Professor Sistrunk at our policy summit here in Atlanta, and we're looking forward to continuing the conversation as well as the education and preparation moving forward. So again, thank you all for coming, and look forward to seeing you soon.